All right, we're at 6 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get ourselves started. Thank you all for being here this evening. Ms. Kinzer, would you call the roll?
Okay. Ms. Parker? Here. Ms. Kinzer is here. Mr. Harlan?
Here.
Mr. Moore is not here. Ms. Irvin's not here yet. Mr. Sims? Here. Mr. Fulbright?
Here.
Mr. Hooper?
Here.
Mr. Howell?
Here.
Mr. Lindsay? And Mr. Dudley.
Okay. We have enough for a quorum, do we not?
We don't really need one, do we?
Oh, that's right. We're not voting on anything. Just in case a vote breaks out, I just want to be covered. All right, well, let's go ahead and move down our agenda. Let's get started with finance. Mr. Laconin.
Good evening. Is this shorter? Anyways.
You've gotten taller.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, thank you. We know that's not true. Thank you. So we have a lot of budget amendments on tonight's agenda. There was an addition yesterday due to a request from a board member, and that is the final budget amendment for Central High School band uniforms. Mr. Ritchie is also here tonight, I believe, to answer any questions as well about that and how our previous band funds went. I can discuss that as well. But I would like to move forward. The other budget amendments we have on there are a lot of carryover from federal funds. And then we also have one more budget amendment. Let me scroll up to that. For the Central High School credit card reimbursement. And then we have a budget amendment in here since we've changed our org chart a little bit. Mr. Pointer's budget is now under Eric's budget, and it used to be intermingled with attendance. So there's a budget amendment in here separating his department, putting it all in health services. So we figured athletics, nursing, these are physical activities. Health makes the most sense as far as the chart of accounts goes. And then it would leave Mr. Ritchie's budget, the attendance budget, and band and art in his line item. So that is also in tonight's budget amendments.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions about the budget amendments? Mr. Lindsay.
I'd just like for someone to expand on that band uniforms. I was the one that asked to put that on there. This was something that was approved, an expenditure that was approved in April of this year. The band uniforms were not purchased. I think there was a lag time. They were doing their research. They were looking to see what they were going to order. And in the meantime, the fiscal year ended. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. And they were told that there would be a PO left open. And somehow, through all the transitions that we went through in the summer, that money was redistributed this fall. Mr. Laconin?
Sorry, just to finish that. So we don't, operational charges, we do not carry those POs over. Wayne's kind of familiar with that already. But because of that, it needed to be brought back out of fund balance to go ahead and bring forward and do a band project again. Well, this time, Mr. Ritchie, rather than give it to one school, decided to divvy those funds out between 3 schools for band. And you all have already voted on that, already approved that, and it's in the budget, and we can move forward on those projects. But after we divvied it out 3 ways, obviously Central High School at that point would no longer have enough money to purchase band uniforms, because originally it was $40,000 for one set of band uniforms. Well, now you've divvied that $40,000 out 3 ways to 3 different schools. So if the cost was $40,000 before, you can't afford those band uniforms. So that's why it's being brought back up tonight. And Mr. Ritchie, I'll pass it to you, sir.
Thank you. To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure that we're talking about the same pool of money. The $40,000, to my understanding, came from the JDC.
That's
the same pool of money. Yeah. And I knew there was some conversation. Of course, I came in.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
This predates you. Yeah.
Right.
It came from what? I don't want
Okay. This is money we got from Shelby County through BEP.
Gotcha.
That was allocated towards that.
That acronym threw me off.
Yeah. Juvenile detention.
And that money is never guaranteed. we don't know if we're getting it or not.
Mhm.
When I realized that that's where the money had come from, I knew there had been some discussion about the $40,000 for the Columbia Central High School band uniforms, but in all honesty, to be fair and equitable, I had a difficult time giving $40,000 to Columbia Central. I understand why they would be, and I wasn't aware of any conversations or part of those conversations back in the spring. But moving forward, I guess we need to be concerned. If we do the $40,000 for the band uniforms, we may be obligated to do the same for the other band programs.
Well, that was why I even raised this question tonight. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I just think we're gonna set a precedent. And so my first question was, and I had assumed that this is not the way we had done business in the past. That band was just like any other extracurricular activity or any other athletic program. Now, hear me out. I'm not against that. I'm not against putting funds into those, but it seems like to me that we're about to set a precedent that if we buy Columbia Central band uniforms, then we need to buy Spring Hill, we need to buy Mount Pleasant, but not only that, we need to buy football uniforms and baseball uniforms. And again, I have zero problem with that, but I just want everyone to be aware kind of that precedent we're setting here tonight. Now, if I've said anything incorrect, please correct me, but I'm not aware that we've operated in this manner in the past.
Not to my knowledge.
Well,
We have.
and I will say, kind of going along with that, the precedent was set in April when we voted and approved the initial budget amendment that had the $40,000. So that's the only reason I brought it back up at this time, was because that was something that was promised and approved and never happened. So I'm looking to make sure that we do what we say we're gonna do, when we say we're gonna do something. As far as precedents, for other things go, I'm asking this simply because I don't know, and I'm not sure who's gonna answer me. Who buys the football helmets for the football team? Boosters? Schools, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Ms. Parker?
I think you probably said a lot of what I was thinking, but I'm curious where the $40,000 that was for the JDC, what it got spent on, since there obviously was there was a vote of this board to spend that money in that manner, and I appreciate that you want to be equitable, but I think when we had that discussion originally, we also had a discussion about, we're gonna do this for Central, and in a couple of years, we're gonna do this for Spring Hill, and in a couple of years, we're gonna do this for Mount Pleasant. I remember that discussion taking place, and so for it to just be cut out all of a sudden, I've got some real concerns about that, and I'm real curious to know what the $40,000 was spent on.
So, as far as I know, the $40,000 has not been spent at all yet. Yes,
Well-
that's correct, because it didn't get spent in that fiscal year. So, it was an operational cost. If it's allocated, it's in the budget, you have those funds. All funds are restricted for education. So, to pull it back out of fund balance, it's restricted for education. It came back to the board, and we decided, the board voted to do something different based on, basically, the attendance supervisor previously brought the first idea. It was voted on, got done that way. So this is and approved, and then the new attendance supervisor, hey, we've got these $40,000 from JDC. It was originally, Carl wanted to use it for band uniforms, school board voted on it. We gotta bring it back to pull the money out for fund balance, and so that's why we're...
And we voted on that particular three-way split, was it last month? In a budget amendment that I had no idea was... Was it earlier this month? So I remember seeing a budget amendment with those... Okay,
It did
September.
go September.
Okay.
And those checks have already been divided and distributed. I gave those to the principals of each of those schools, and it's the understanding that the bands can spend those however they choose to spend them, whatever their needs are.
Right.
It was just communicated that all of the funds not spent had to be returned at the end of the year, but we fully anticipate all of those funds being
Yeah.
spent.
Okay.
I just think it's a little problematic that we approve something in April, we get something else that comes back to us in September, and now we're now we're gonna vote on something in December. It's hard for us to be consistent when we don't get clear information from staff, is my biggest concern on that. How many budget amendments do you have here, Doug? 15, and you'll probably have 20, 25 by the time we get to the board meeting. So it's real difficult for us to keep everything straight. It's difficult for you guys to keep things straight. So, I would just ask for y'all's help on that kind of stuff. When we've already approved something, when it circles back around, we need to know if we're changing directions. And I understand people change, but people have to communicate when those people change, if their vision for that department changed. Because I don't know that that was the vision that changed for the board.
Well, the board reviewed the exact budget amendment, and it was just described in there, and I asked if there were any questions.
I understand, Doug.
And there weren't any.
I understand, but I'm
No.
saying we also approved a
There-
previous budget
30
amendment that
other
we didn't know
days.
didn't get spent, because we don't know what purchase orders don't get spent. If you'd like to give us a list
Yeah,
of those in
actually,
July, we can do
Every
that.
budget amendment, there's a budget amendment that says, this is to reimburse the budget for capital purchase orders that expired. And you voted on all those budget amendments as well. So when a purchase order, if it's an operating expenditure like this one is,
Mhm.
it's liquidated and it's done with that year. We do not carry that over. And so, when we do that, we bring it back.
Yes.
And, that's what we did, and it was on the agenda for the work session, on the agenda for the voting session. We didn't receive any questions. Jeff signed it, Director Hickman signed it. There was a lot of set of eyes in this room. I don't think my set of eyes should be the only one.
I'm not saying you're a set of eyes, and I didn't say you're a set of eyes. But I don't think that the board chair should have to bring this back to us. That's my point.
Anything else? Thank you. Mr. Howell?
So I just want to remind the board that there's 20-some-odd schools, and each of them have sports teams and other things. So when we start seeing a lot more of these, we need to make sure that we have room in our budget for that. I know Culleoka has a great need for this same exact thing, and it may not be band uniforms, but there's uniforms. There's always an issue for uniforms. And so just be reminded this is going to be coming up. It needs to come up. If we're going to pay for one, we need to pay for all.
I'm gonna ask a question, and you're gonna not be happy when I ask it. We have a list of buses and their ages. Do we have anything similar with sports uniforms? Anything that approaches 15 years old? No, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant to ask.
I know what you meant. We do not, and Mr. Hickman and I were just sidebarring about that because the district has never, that has always been an individual sports responsibility, or an activity, overall general fund of the athletics to purchase those, and we were just talking, this is band, this would get into maybe academic teams. So we don't, but we can compile that.
Yeah, I don't want this to turn into something nitpicky, but I do also want to reiterate that this is something the board approved, that was promised to a program at a school in our district, and I heard about it because someone was told we were promised money for our uniforms, but it got divided up between 3 other schools. We don't have that money anymore. Right. And I looked back and I said, it was approved in April. You should have that money. So that's where all this has come from. So I'll buy baseball hats for whoever wants them. But we've already promised this purchase for this group 7 months ago.
Could I ask?
Now we're going back trying to fix something that didn't happen.
Just generally maybe we just address this with a number within the upcoming budget.
That's the way it should be.
We bring you a number and give that to you, and you guys can decide yea or nay. But until then, kind of stay out of it, because I can foresee coaches and band directors calling us tomorrow saying, we watched last night and, hey, our trousers look pretty rough.
How many of them called the day after the April meeting?
No one.
Okay. Mr. Hooper.
Yeah, so I'm kinda with you on that. Money promised is money that needs to be spent. But personally moving forward, I don't wanna spend any money on uniforms for any sports team or anything. That's a personal opinion, 'cause I grew up my whole life in this school system, not getting that money. So I mean, I just don't think we need to be in that business. It's, these are activities that you voluntarily join. And I don't believe it's the entire county's responsibility to pay for everyone's, decisions.
Thank you. Seeing, Ms. Irvin.
Along with Mr. Hooper, I kinda feel that same sentiment, but the only question I have that I think I asked earlier when we were discussing this, I mean, are the costs extreme? I mean, what we do, with my children's sports, they pretty much buy their own uniforms and they become part of their, their normal everyday wear when the season's over. So again, I think if we're gonna have a standard, we need to have a standard that's across the board. But I can understand, you know, a $50, $100 uniform versus, I don't know, $40,000 for, I don't know how much they are for the band. So I mean, if it's like a $400 or $500 per student, then maybe somebody could help me understand the justification there. 'Cause if that's the case, I do get it. But if it's just, you know, a monetary amount that others could handle, you know.
And then with along those lines, you said that they get to keep those uniforms? So then the band would then keep their band uniforms?
So
Just for them?
yeah, just for clarification, most schools, football uniforms, basketball uniforms are owned by the school. Minor sports are usually what you said, it's purchased and it becomes theirs. Now, in a high school, maybe baseball uniforms aren't, something like that, but generally, football and basketball are the athletic uniforms. Band uniforms, the flag folks, their uniforms are owned by the school. Generally, other than that, minor sports, they purchase and then move on with them.
Mr. Sims.
So, Mr. Ritchie or Doug, whoever, so Central High School, they received $13,333 this past month, is that correct?
Actually, they received, if memory serves me correctly, it was 17,000 something. 17,225. Spring Hill received 15,600. Mount Pleasant was 6,695. How I calculated that, I reached out to all three principals. I asked them to provide me numbers of participants in their band programs. I divided those numbers into the $40,000, which equated to $65 per student. And based on that calculation, that's what determined the amount that was given to those schools. Please do keep in mind that I did research that quite a bit, making sure, looking for any open POs, seeing what obligations were there. I could not find anything other than just what I heard based on conversation that was made.
Also, because when the budget amendment was approved, but a purchase to actually buy them was never run through this board, and the original budget amendment was almost $40,000, and any purchase above $25,000 has to come through this board for approval. So quotes were not gotten to bring it to this board to actually use the budgeted funds.
Well, I would be more, I don't like approving something and ripping the rug out from under someone. However, to fulfill our obligation, if we give them $22,775, we would fulfill the $40,000 that we originally told them. Maybe save face both ways.
I would just say if that money's already been given to them to spend, that $17,000 may not be there anymore. Then in essence, we would be wasting $22,000.
I just wanna remind the board that uniforms, football, the revenue sports, pretty much carry over into all the sports is the thing, that they're revenue sports. So they're a lot of that is taken care of by the revenue. But band is not a revenue. There's no revenue other than what the parents have to raise. And they don't buy uniforms every year. They last a long time. And so I'm kind of appalled that that we all of a sudden voted this, and then you know, there are 200 band members over at Central High School. I don't know how many's at Spring Hill or Mount Pleasant, but, I think we're obligated to do what we said we were gonna do.
Thank you. Mr. Hooper?
Yeah, I'm with Will or Mr. Sims on that one. I think we're obligated to do what we said we were gonna do, not 62,700 something. I think that's a little bit too much, because that's more than what we offered, and it's more than what we promised. Anything more than that just seems a little bit careless for us.
So there's 200 band members. If you break that down by 40,000, that's about $200 a piece. I'm pretty sure football costs something like that every year to play football, or more. I know I spend $100 a year on soccer, and soccer's a secondary sport. So, and then they're able to make these uniforms last for multi-years. So, I mean, once again, are we gonna do this for one school one time, or are we gonna do this for every school for every time? Because I kinda have a problem with it if we're not. Especially when it's, I understand that it's an expensive endeavor, but $200 per student isn't out of the ballpark to what some students are currently paying to do minor sports. So, I guess that's where I'm at, and it's only a one-time deal, so if they make it last multiple years, I don't know.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, your last light on this, and then we're gonna move on, but Mr. Pearman, I'd like to just ask, I think I'm confused from our earlier statement. How much do the football player parents pay for helmets?
That's purchased by the initial purchase for a new program would be the county, the school, or the booster club pay after that.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay?
I didn't mean to start all this, but I guess I did. I don't wanna be argumentative, but we can use example after example, you know, of Boston butts that get sold, or golf tournaments that are put on, I mean, and so on and so forth. You know, money paid out of parents' pockets, you know, but I won't go into all that. But what I would ask is, it sounds like that we've uncovered maybe a problem in some people's eyes on the board tonight, and honestly, it's a problem I think that we've had for a long, long time. I think Ms. Parker spoke about it. If we have a baseball team win a state championship, we come pat them on the back and bring them to a board meeting and tell them congratulations, and we want to, you know, get it out to the media how great a Murray County school did, but we don't have any skin in the game as far as the district goes. You know, I know if Mr. Pearman may have signed it. I know there's been parents sign a note at Spring Hill High School for make improvements to the baseball stadium. So I went going around the world to say I would like for Mr. Pearman, Mr. Pointer, whomever, maybe to bring us back some type of funding plan, maybe with some options. I'm not saying that we try to do everything, because I think it's important that those people that play those sports and those families that are involved have skin in the game. But you know, I've said it one time, as far as athletics goes, there's two things you have to play athletics without a doubt. One, you have to have officials, and two, you have to have travel to get to the games. And I think as a district we should pay for those. Those are just fundamental expenses. But anyways, however we were to go about doing that, whether we say the district is going to give $200 per child every year, or $100 per participant every year, I don't know what that would look like. Don't know if we can afford it, but I think it's something worth exploring and looking into, because I think for far too long we've told our extracurricular activities, and I'm saying athletics, but we've told drama classes, we've told all these others, you guys, you go raise the money and figure it out yourself, and, I think we need to have some skin in the game.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with you. And through this pandemic, the district has really tried to help out those areas that struggle to get revenue, such as theater, where they had to cancel plays. That's their revenue stream. Sad to say, sometimes when you do offer something one year, it does become an expectation to some extent the following years. Sad to say, but true. Just for the record, this year we did receive $57,000 from the JDC from Shelby County. Keep in mind there are other needs in the district, one of which you all approved was for 504 supports. There's never really been 504 supports like SPED, and that is going toward equipment. We actually have an EA, dedicated 504 EA and that sort of thing. So I don't know if the person in my position prior to me, I just don't want the thought of JDC funds always going toward whatever. I do want to see those funds to go where there are needs. And I know 504 students, we have approximately 223 students in the district that are 504, and oftentimes their needs go unmet because there's just not really been any funding for them. So I took this as an opportunity to account for that. So.
Mr. Gaines.
And just one more thing, those funds from Shelby County were funds that were in arrears that they owed us for students that were in the previous year. So just like the process when we had those previous funds, we asked the finance, what could we do with these funds? Do they need to be, they were for JDC students, but that year, those years were already have passed, and we got that fund in arrears, and they said, well, the year is over, you can use it however you want to. That generated the use of those funds for other options.
Okay.
And so that's where that funding comes from. We may not always have the funding in arrears. Hopefully Shelby County will catch up one day, and we'll have.
Well, I think you both just made my point. The simple fact that this was a one-time purchase. Well, let me take that back. This was a one-time promise to a school program. That's what happened back in April. We knew it was one-time money. We knew it wasn't going to be an ongoing thing, but it was a one-time promise. I think it's time to move on from these budget amendments. Obviously, I don't guess I'm going to get consensus to put this on consent agenda, even though it should be. What do we want to put 15 on consent agenda? Thought it was worth a try. How about the other 14? Okay. And then we'll vote on 15 separate under, does it fall under new business or old business at this point? It would be old business, because this is an old promise, so I want it under old business on the agenda. Moving on, monthly financials.
We are in really good financial standing. When you look at October compared to previous years, our fund balance is about $6 to $7 million higher than last year, and a lot of that has to do with a lot of vacancies and a lot of savings. We're looking good at this point, but mainly because we're barely getting by, with providing service. You can also take a look at the sales tax report and see that we're outperforming last year every single month thus far. So everything looks good. We do not and have not needed a tax anticipation note this year, and we're pretty much through the woods on that.
Sounds great. Any other questions for Mr. Laconin and Finance? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here and for all your reporting. Moving on to instruction.
Could you bring up that slide, Dave? Just wanted to give you an update. We shared with you 2 months ago about at the end of the slide on the data, the things that we were doing to improve achievement across the district, the supports that we were doing, and I just wanted to reiterate those, that those things are ongoing in full force. We are certainly have administrative collaborative teams, we have textbook implementation teams in reading and math, and once you approve, as we approve the other textbooks and get those in place, we will move to do those same implementation practices with those teams. As a follow-up to that, we're doing those walkthroughs and out in buildings and giving principals feedback about trends, about the use of how they're using the materials, what's going on in the instructional practices. We're seeing steady improvement in the use of the curriculum that's implemented, especially in reading and math, and with the use of the instructional practices that go along with our instructional practice guide, and I'll talk about that. As you know, we've implemented the case benchmark. We did the fall assessment. We're in the process of doing the ELC assessment for high school, and then we'll be doing the midwinter assessment after we get back from break for the for grades 2 through 8. So those things are still ongoing. You'll see that, of course, the Ames Web always comes in the winter. We have the ACT practice assessment coming up in January. Just wanted to update that those things, that those 3 slides that we're continuing with: professional learning communities, high quality instructional material implementation, assessment practice and purpose, meeting with those principals, assistant principals, looking at data, seeing how we need to adjust instruction, seeing what we need to do the pacing, as those things are that are ongoing. Just next slide, please, sir. You've probably heard from people about the instructional practice guide. That's the instrument that we use when we do walkthroughs. We're looking at culture, we're looking at use of materials, we're looking at questioning. Teachers are meeting to develop their units. You've seen that in the unit prep guide. We think it's important that you not only, as you look at that material, that you work together to develop those challenging questions, those challenging activities, that you use the material effectively. You look at what's in the material, both in reading and math, but you also think about those questions. So you see that in that unit prep guide. That feeds into the individual teacher in their lesson prep guide and how they're doing that. We're really focusing on the unit prep guides, and we'll continue forward with the lesson prep guides later. We're continuing those instructional walkthroughs, and that PLC calendar is set for the whole year. Everybody knows when we meet at principals meeting, we meet, and then we we do PLCs after that. So those follow every month. So that cycle are all those tools of the trades that we're using to continue to move forward. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Ms. Parker.
Can I get an update on the Elevate program at Central?
Yes, I sent you an email. We have gotten started. We do have some. We've hired our classroom coordinators. One of them just resigned. Was it yesterday, Dr. Kovac, or? Right. So, So we're still we have to get other classroom coordinators. We're still training other people. We've got a meeting set with them at the beginning of right after Thanksgiving break to look at where we need to continue for next year. Trying to look at those areas, and not only at Central, are there other areas that we may need to use Elevate. So we'll be trying to bring that back to you if we need to continue that. Right now, based on those positions are still open, and we're still not filling those positions. So we may have some December graduates. I can have Dr. Kovac talk about how the instruction going. She can give you a brief update on that if you'd like. Just to come up to a microphone.
So we have started the Elevate classrooms. I will tell you, I'm very impressed with their platform and how they have sent their logins. They also have what's called an Otis platform, which is just for the students to complete work on. The hurdle right now, like Mr. Gaines has said, is just trying to find classroom coordinators in order to be in those positions, because right now I'm having a sub in there every single day. but good news is I had 100% sub rate filled today at Central, so I was very excited about that. So just getting someone in there for consistency, but I'm very impressed with the platform. I'm very impressed with their support for us at Central and trying to move the students along. And I do think this is an alternative for the shortage that we're facing. So I am impressed.
Can you go through how many classes are being covered right now by their program? And then also, what about, I mean, I thought the email said it was gonna start November 11th or 12th or something like that. So what are we doing as far as remediation, whatnot, for the half a quarter plus that those kids missed?
So, we selected, when we, started with Elevate on the 11th or 12th, they sent me a survey to select the pacing. And so we actually started back at the beginning with pacing, and so they'll have to pace it, put the speed on the pacing a little faster. But the good news is that the Algebra 1 classes, since they are on a block, we chose at Central to do extended block planning, which some schools do not do. They're usually just a one block class, which has given us, I don't want to say bought us some time, but will allow us to put some foundational in with the pacing in the curriculum. So we did choose to start back at the beginning on the Algebra 1.
One thing I want to add, I do think in our discussion that looking at the duties of that classroom coordinator, we may need to think about changing the salary of that person. They do, in looking at that, they are responsible for, they're the person that takes the grades out of that system and translates them to hours. So we may need to consider that as we move forward in terms of making that more responsible and more attractive.
I think at the last board meeting that we had, I think there was some mention that y'all were having trouble filling those classroom coordinator positions. And I'll just go back to, I mean, you've got a memo on here to add teachers. I fully expected to see something on there about increasing the pay for the classroom coordinators. When we're talking about 3, 4, 5 maybe, I think was the most that we had approved. It's not a lot. I mean, that's probably less than the 40,000 that we just spent 15 minutes discussing.
What I'd like to do is, I would want to be very careful about having that raised, because once we bump that up, because our intent is when Elevate does go away, because we can fill those positions, that we can put them back into an EA classroom. What I would rather see is us go the stipend route while they're in there, since it's hopefully a temporary type duty that maybe we can add to instead of part of the raise.
Well, I think that's a good discussion that we probably should have, but I will just be very honest. If I'm a parent of an Algebra 1 student at Central right now, I'm not happy with this district. And I'm not happy with waiting until December to figure out what we're going to do to make sure my kid has a teacher in their class. So, I mean, all of this, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of urgency when it comes to talking about some of these issues for Central. And, you know, we know what happened last year. I mean, we can talk about the 40,000 for band uniforms and all that. There was a huge transition that was taking place at Central. I mean, Ms. Kovac is there. She wasn't there last year. If she was there in April, she probably would have made sure that the band uniforms got ordered potentially. So I think there's just a lot of this stuff that's falling to the wayside. I just hope we continue to be fair and equitable to everybody, and that includes Central.
Mr. Howell.
So I want to switch gears here and go back to the presentation that we were presented. So I'm hearing a lot of things in your presentation that kind of align with some of the complaints that I'm having, actually. I hear, you know, assessments, we're assessing, and that's cool. I like the data. I'm just afraid that we may be data drunk. I think that maybe we need to seriously consider what's required by the state and what we're requiring, and at some point figure out how we cut some of that back, because I feel like we're losing time, teachers' time, administrators' time, because the other complaint I hear is that administrators, they can't administrate. It's hard to administrate when you're not in a building, would you not agree? And if they're being constantly called down for meetings here or there, and it's not one, it's not two, it's a lot. It's a lot of administrators. I expect our administrators to be in that building, doing what they're supposed to be doing. And when they're being called for various meetings down to central office, I'm sorry, I thought we had coordinators for a reason. I thought they were supposed to be kind of a liaison. I expect that that coordinator to be going to these schools, to be that liaison. I do not want my administrators all over the place, because they have enough meetings to handle when they are at the school meeting with parents who are upset, and we have no shortage of those. So that's what I'm hearing, and what you're telling me aligns with it. You know, we're assessing. We've got this data. We're using this data. We're telling our administrators how to use this data. We're meeting how to use this data. Your own words, what we're doing is evidence, is exactly what they're telling me, that they don't have time to be administrators.
So we are looking at our assessments, trying to see which ones we're cut out, the ones at the state, if they're required. We're looking at what are other ways that we can cut those assessments to use the ones that the case assessments, or will already count for the intervention assessments, so we don't have to do Ames Web. So we are looking at that, what assessments we are cutting. None of our collaboratives are in person. They're all teams. So principals and assistant principals and everybody, they're at their buildings. They're at those buildings. We try to record those, so if they have to miss them, they have to be out, they can listen. So they're not out of their buildings. The only out of building meeting they come to is a principals meeting, and that is once a month. It's 2 hours, and that's the only meeting it's the only meeting that they come out of the building to. Now, they may have to come for other things that they need, but the collaboratives are they're all teams meetings, and they're all meeting. They're in their office, or they're not out of the building.
I understand that, but whether they're in a meeting online in their office with the door closed, or whether they're not available to administrate. So maybe we should be more clear and accurate with what we're disseminating in these meetings, and realize that there's also unit schools. So that unit school principal is not in one meeting; they're in 3 meetings. So I understand that the way we're structured is the way we're structured, and there's going to be different things going on. But I also realize that I want to make sure that these coordinators are being utilized in the way that they were sold to us, and that they're going to take work away from our administrators. And to be honest with you, that's not what I'm hearing from multiple. I'm not saying 1, 2, or 3. I'm saying several administrators are not getting the bang for the buck here. So moving forward, let's try to look at that and figure out what we're doing wrong.
Any other questions or comments? Do we need to take any action on? Okay. Moving on, next.
The next item is just, we changed the ACT date. It fell after a professional development day based on input from principals and teachers. We just moved that, and we'll just move that date on the calendar. We put it on there because I don't think it's an instructional day change, but we wanted to make sure you were aware of it, because it was on the calendar. But I don't think testing days, we don't have to vote on a change to the calendar.
Okay. Thank you. I want to mention, it didn't get on the agenda. I'll put it on there for December's work session. I believe you got a copy of the letter too from Mr. Todd Baxter regarding the election day. They set the dates for the elections, and we need to possibly adjust our calendar to reflect that. I'll bring that to the December meeting. I just meant to do it this month and not let it slip by.
We have it. We were going to bring it as part of the calendar committee as to talk about the adjustment.
That's fine, as long as we don't forget to do that. That was my only concern on that one. All right, well, let's move on to zoning and facilities. Oh, I thought we'd already talked about that. I was hoping y'all did that while I was out of the room. All right, request to add additional teaching positions.
So we are, as you saw in the memo, we're over EIA at 2 schools, and we need to add two positions. We want the board to consider, giving us the authority to add. We're not saying we're going to add 5 positions, but we do need to add these 2 positions at this point. And we're just anticipating growth after Christmas, and as you know, it takes time in between cycles to come back and bring that back to you to add those. But we will, as I did in that memo, show you where we're over and justify why we need to add that position.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lindsey?
A couple questions. We gave you guys approval for 10 growth positions in August. Are those?
Yes, they've already been deployed and, they've already been distributed, and we're already distributing ESSER position, but with EIA, we have to meet EIA. We can't use ESSER teachers to meet EIA, but those positions have already been distributed.
Down look today, we had somewhere between 20 and 25 vacancies for classroom teachers.
Yes. Yeah. We still, I mean, as soon as those positions came up when we distributed those positions, you do have some positions that are, maternity leaves, those things like that. We do have some vacancies that have been open that we're trying to fill, but, there's still those classes, as we look at those averages, they're over right now. We need to add those positions. We need at least to, what the state's gonna say is what's your action to do that? And our action is, we're adding positions. Even though we know there's still some vacancies, we're making that effort to add those positions.
And I'm gonna be the bad guy for saying this, but, did we make sure that, our out-of-zone policy is being followed? So from what I know, they're all new enrollments. I haven't seen any out-of-zone violation. Yeah, 'cause all those, we solved all those, I thought, when we did But doesn't our out-of-zone policy say that you have a spot unless someone in zone, you can be bumped by someone that is in zone if there's no longer room, and if we're adding teacher, we don't have room, I would think, but just throwing that out there. And the last thing, Mr. Luke Coleman just talked about in his report about how much money we've saved due to vacancies. I don't see any need to take money out of fund balance. We've already got it in that line item because of vacancies. Did I miss that, or?
And we've done that on a few potential budget amendments already, particularly with SPED and on some of the EAs that we did. Rather than take it from fund balance, we took it from those teacher line items. So we've been utilizing that savings thus far, which in the past, when there wasn't actual vacancies, has gotten us in a lot of trouble, but we're keeping an eye on it this time. So it would be a way to save, but if we didn't increase the budget, then we wouldn't be showing the state that we're trying to meet our classroom sizes, to our teacher-student ratio on those. So that was the idea, to make sure that if we did have all those teachers in there for the entire year, that we were budgeted and prepared to pay for all the teachers to keep the classroom size equitable.
And I'm just thinking about the time it takes. When pulling money out of fund balance, it goes from this body to the commission before it's approved. Commission's not meeting in December, so it's gonna be the third Monday in January.
If we pull it from the payroll line, it takes the same amount of time because you're touching payroll. So all payroll goes to the commission as well.
But, or maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it's gonna be in the 140 and 141 in the teacher's line. We should already have excess monies in there. So
you could just increase your teachers.
We could just approve the positions, and a budget amendment's not even required, whether we take it out of fund balance or another line. It's already sitting in that line. So that was, I don't have a problem with the positions, but I would think we as a board could approve those positions, and then we don't have to wait on anybody. We can go on and
that's why there's not a budget amendment for teachers on here.
Okay. Do we wanna put that approval on, consent, or do we wanna talk about it more? Consent? All right. Now, are we okay to move to zoning and facilities at this point? Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. The first two things there, 3.31 is your training report, your monthly update, and 3.32, is that the athletic and maintenance money. You can see we are beginning to dig into those. Work will begin in the coming week on the athletic, approvals that went through. Maintenance, we're working through. Mr. Hall, Mr. Ring and I met this last week, and we have come up with a list of items that we're gonna bid or that we're gonna come back to you asking to group together, for a large purchase. So we're gonna work through that. I do apologize, we are missing our normal capital report, and I just noticed that. That will be on there as soon as I can talk to, the office tomorrow and get that on there. There's not been a change. We've not spent any money out of it since last month, but that report did get left off, and I apologize for that. 3.3.3 is the ESSER HVAC funds that came out of ESSER 3. We had asked, Mr. Fulbright, right before the last board meeting to add this too. It was not on the last work session. The reason we had asked to add it last board meeting was because of the supply chain issues that we're seeing. This was approved through ESSER 3. And we need it, if it's gonna be approved, to be approved as quickly as possible so that we can get work scheduled for the summer next year. A delay could push us into next school year or possibly to the next summer. So this is already an item that's been discussed during the ESSER 3 discussion, and it's just back to you.
We good with consent on this, or do we need to have more discussion? Ms. Parker?
I'll just ask the question, when we say that we're gonna spend $6 million, on train, I have some concerns about it just because of where we are instructionally. And this is nothing against you, Eric, but I just feel like from an instructional standpoint, I saw something that was posted on Facebook just the other day about Cox and about 44 kids being at grade level in the entire school. I think there's over 600 kids there. I think there were less than 50 kids that were on grade level in math. And so my only question is, not that I don't want to spend this money, but have we done everything that we can? Because 600 kids not being able to read on grade level and not being able to do math seems like we're really not where we need to be from an instructional standpoint, particularly at that school. And I'd love to see those numbers for every school, to be honest with you. But I don't know that the money that we're putting into for ESSER on instruction, I'd really hoped that we could go through those items that were on the second page. I know I've had teachers that have asked me about iReady. I mean, my own kids, they use iReady Math, and teachers seem to have bought into it. Kids seem to have bought into it. Not that they like it, but they bought into it, and they have to do it for homework. I'm curious if it would not be beneficial to do something like that on the reading side of it. I know that's an option. I've had teachers that have asked me specifically for that to be a purchase, and I think that's done at various schools. But if they're seeing growth in that, is that something that we're offering at Cox? Is that something that we're offering throughout our district, not just at Cox? The other thing is, I personally think that this is a commission responsibility. I'm sorry. I know I wasn't there on Saturday, but I did meet with Eric yesterday and saw the list of, many maintenance needs that we have in our system. And it's not that I don't want to do this project, but I would really like some type of understanding with the commission that if we do this, that we're going to see a $6 million windfall to us so we can have money for so that we can have money for maintenance, so things aren't going to get cut out in the future. I think to do this without that type of understanding is really short-sighted on our part. I'll use this as another example. When Eric and I were talking yesterday, we added on to Marvin Wright. I don't think that was a school board responsibility to do that with EMG money. I say that only because you guys just looked at the list and there's a bunch of maintenance needs. If we had spent $6 million fixing up our schools and asked the commission to fund the addition that at this point is needed at Marvin Wright, then I think we need to stay in our lane. We always want them to stay in their lane. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I'm just saying if we do this, I would really like to see us have some very good discussions with the county commission to make sure that we're not, we just talked about setting a precedent. What happens the next time? we need to have an HVAC system done, and they say you have the money in your fund balance, so just go ahead and do it. I just think this is really dangerous for us to do this, especially when, again, instructionally, I'm not sure that our kids from a year and a half essentially off are having their lives disrupted because of COVID, which is what this money was originally intended for, if they're back to where they need to be. I just would really love to hear something as to how we're addressing that aspect.
Addressing the learning loss? Gotcha. Yeah, one of the things, if you're talking about Cox specifically, you know, we've done a lot of admin changes, we've brought some stuff over there, and, you know, and I've talked to many of you about hearing from some of the teachers about, some of the work that we're doing. And, you know, we're not doing the same thing because we can't do the same thing and expect different results. Our expectations have really grew. Part of that is the case, and I know Mr. Howell brought that up about assessment, and, you know, I'm starting to see now that we've ran the first one, we're starting to get some of the data back. It's really showing us where we're at, and I've talked to several schools, maybe not the right ones, but they're excited in how the teachers are using it. You know, we are getting these textbooks in there, which I've told you guys from the very first day, that has been one of the most important things that we needed to have. These kids needed to have books in hands. They needed to have those, and we've got that started. So we have, and going back to our coordinators, they are in the schools. I think I made the comment that I'm very blessed I never see them. And that's because we're never in the central office. We are always out at schools, and they're really pushing through. They're helping. They're there as coordinators, as help. We are looking at balanced leadership. We're trying to train our principals on the change process because we know there's a lot of change that has to be done. We're bringing in the resources that we've brought before you in prior board meetings, the things that we're using our ESSER funds for, some of the programs that we're bringing in, as we know they're research-based and they work. So we are putting a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of manpower and time into what we're doing in this district. And, you know, it is. And when we see those amount of kids that are proficient, it's concerning. And that's why I felt I was brought in here, is because that is what we have, and we are, you know, we have already been excited because we're seeing that shift. We're seeing it. Is it low? Heck yeah, it's low. It's still low, and that's where I said we still have a lot of areas to grow in, and we've got to get that achievement up. And one of the things that we're doing that's been a real shift in this whole district is a shift away from where we're looking at skills-based to making sure that that standards base is on the radar, that these kids know standards, that they are being intervened on. Because at the end of the day, these tests that you see from the state, they're about standards-based, not skills-based. And so we want to make sure that the kids that don't have skills, not only are getting that skills-based intervention, but a strong intervention program built in for the standards-based as well. So we have many layers upon layers of things that we are making sure that we do to catch every student. And when we say it's not cliche or a tagline, we're not trying. My expectation is we are meeting every child where they are at. When I walk into a school, my expectation is if I go to that principal or that teacher, they can tell me exactly where Johnny is at, what they're doing for Johnny, what they're using to do it for Johnny, and not just on the skills base, but on the standards based as well. And it's high expectations, and we are pushing a lot of high expectations in this district right now. And frankly, it is making some principals uncomfortable. It's making some teachers uncomfortable. But if we don't have those high expectations that are attainable, we're going to stay where we're at. So not just the expectations, but all these things and all these purchases that you guys have been voting on, all these ESSER funds that you've been seeing, looking at trying to reduce class sizes. We are really trying to hit it
Okay.
every way we can.
Let me bring this back around. Yes or no question. Are we confident that we're spending all of the ESSER money needed to address those needs that Ms. Parker just brought up? Yes or no question?
No.
Okay. Then I think that leads to the question of the use of this money. Let's, Ms. Irvin, you have your light on.
Well, it's in thought with where you were headed. In bringing up this particular school, I've had actually several parents reach out to me. And something else, to be a good steward of that money that we received, the ESSER money, we had talked about like the emotional guidance aspect of using those funds. It's been a very challenging year for all of us, but especially our children. And I think that we're seeing that a lot, especially in some of those classrooms. I think even the kids that are wanting to learn are having a lot of distractions through ill behavior and such. So my question is this, and I'm not just pinpointing that one school, it's all across the county, obviously, you know, children, but have we done anything to increase our emotional, like, / guidance type counseling support for children? Because that's a concern that if that's something we could spend money on too, I would like to see.
I'll keep it short. Yes, we have, and some of the things that the ESSER money funded was for that too.
Okay. Well, this will not go on consent. This will go to, discussion at the next board meeting. Wayne, Mr. Lindsey. That's all right.
I just want to comment on the question that Mr. Fulbright asked you, Mr. Hickman. I'm kind of concerned that we had multiple meetings on when we were setting a budget for ESSER 3.0, and from the get-go, this HVAC was in there. And then we had a second meeting because there was some question. There were some people on the board that questioned whether it should be in there, and that's fine. I mean, that's what we're here for. But then we as a board, it was still presented to us as an option. We sent that into our as our plan, as our funding plan, how we're going to use this ESSER money, and then Mr. Fulbright just asked you a point-blank question, and for all intents and purposes, you just said, I'd rather spend that money on something else. I'm just wondering why in the heck that didn't get said 2 months ago.
It got said probably about a year ago because, as I recall, the board is the one that wanted to put that on there. And I'm not talking about the board, I'm talking about the plan. You brought us a plan. You brought us a plan how we were going to spend this Correct.
$18 million, and this $6 million was in the first draft of it.
As asked for by the board. The board asked for us to put that on there. And then when we brought it up 2 months ago, I said, although I may not be in favor, this is something that we told the commission that we were going to do, and I have reserve about telling them now we're not.
We took one vote on it, and it was after it was presented to us. We've only voted on this one time. We voted what this, the ESSER 3.0, $18 million, we voted on that one time. I don't know when the board, that's the only vote we've ever taken on it.
But we went through a process where you guys told me what you wanted on it.
All right, thank you very much. We will move on. That's for Saturday, by the way. So sorry. We'll discuss this and take it up at full. Mr. Sims.
If or when this does not get approved, what's the plan going forward? I mean, will you have to change the ESSER plan to send back to the state?
Yes.
Okay. Is that everybody? Okay. All right, moving on now to item number 4. Item number 4.
Bleacher repair. If you see the list here, this is touching all of the bleachers, mainly indoor bleachers for gyms throughout the district. This are funds that are available through capital projects money, and we're just asking that you get this approved. We can get to this work rather quickly. The one set of bleachers that are not in here is the stadium at Spring Hill High School. Since we met on Saturday, I have requested from, Mr. Hall is working with some folks to get us a demolition cost on that. Mr. Ring and I went Monday morning to Spring Hill High School. I have some pictures on my phone, that I can show you where concrete's falling out of the football stands. But this request right here, bid 22.03, 3 is to fix bleachers and to work on bleachers throughout the district.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. What is the significance of $336.60? What can you do for that? 'Cause it's listed 3 times on here.
Sometimes they just have to go in and reset the relays. Our bleachers have multiple motors under them, and if you've ever seen a set of bleachers come out when they push the button and they start doing this, the relays are out of time, and the company has to come in and reset those.
That's kind of a minimum for that?
It's a minimum. It's just a basic, kind of tune-up cost.
Okay. Are there no bleachers at Woodard, Brown, Riverside, or Spring Hill Elementary?
Those are not bleachers that we operate on a consistent basis to where, like at EA Cox right now, they run the bus room in the gym every morning. The bleachers aren't functioning properly, so the bleachers stay out all day, and they lose quite a bit of space for PE because they have to leave the bleachers out.
That wasn't
But no,
wasn't my question.
we did not address elementary schools. We only addressed
Baker Elementary's on here, Marvin Wright Elementary, Highland Park Elementary.
Okay, and I'll let Mr. Hall say that. Those were results of inspection, so I'll let him say that.
Yeah,
Outside of that.
I'm sorry, I had to interrupt. All these costs for repairs, we go out and get inspections first, and they look at them, and most of the ones that need them are the bigger ones that have the motors and the gearing and all that, the relay, the controls in them. A lot of the elementary schools are just manual, and they
Okay.
don't require as much.
So that brings me to my question. Are there not any bleachers at Brown, Woodard, Riverside, or Spring Hill Elementary?
I don't think there are at Brown.
Okay.
There are at Woodard, and I believe at Spring Hill Elementary.
Okay, Riverside?
They have a small, maybe a 3-row set.
Okay, but they have some?
Yes.
Okay. But we're not gonna do anything for those schools, we're just gonna do it for these other schools?
They did not have anything
They didn't-
identified during
right.
inspection.
That wasn't my question.
Correct, we're not.
Okay. What is the significance, we have one school on here that has over 1/3 of the money dedicated to it. What's the issue there?
At Culleoka.
Yes, it's 33.5%.
Probably just the nature of, and I don't recall what the nature of each one was.
Well, that's a significant one.
Do remember that in that gym, you have a balcony on either side, so you actually have 4 sets of bleachers
Yeah.
in that gym, whereas some only have 2.
I'm just asking because that's just
I will
almost double anything else on here.
I'll pull the specifics on that and send it to you guys tomorrow, and it'll have a breakdown for what they are on each one.
They weren't in there?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. But I just wanted to reiterate that there are some elementary schools that aren't gonna benefit from what we're doing here, right?
And we're not, I mean, we've not
Just,
spent all of
that's
this
just
money.
all I
Correct.
wanted to bring up. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
I think you gotta know that they had somebody come and look at them, they figured out what was broken, and then they gave us a price to fix what was broken. If it wasn't broken, there's nothing to fix.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, moving on to McDowell demo.
This was a request from us on Saturday. We had numbers on demoing that from when we had the, plans drawn, when we were discussing a new site. The number at that time was $457,000. We went back, had that same vendor re-up those numbers. The only real difference right now is the cost of fuel now versus what the cost of fuel then was. And asbestos abatement, is really kind of an up in the air question. Even if we tear it down, we have to go in and abate the asbestos before we can. And there's always questions of when they start removing things, where they may find more than a knot. If you see the attachment there, there's an allotment in there for that. We did, and you see that we went through Hewlett Spencer on this simply because they had the numbers from before, and this was the fastest way to get you a number. If we hard bid it, it would take at least another month, and we wanted to bring you these numbers quickly. But you can see there for $501,000 we know that we can, under guarantee, tear the building down and have it taken away.
Okay, thank you. And kind of as a extra point of information to all this, we did go to the county commission took up the question in resolution form, and I have the resolution pulled up here. Basically, accepting the property if it were to be deeded. The county would also desire to keep the McDowell name associated with the property, and that received quite a bit of discussion. The outcome of that discussion was that they put it off and wanted to talk about it again in January. We let them know that we do have the ability and will discuss whether or not just to put it up for bid again, based on some information we gathered Saturday. So that's kind of where we're at. Either way, I think we decided, or we discussed rather, that the demolition, for better or for worse, needs to happen. So I just wanted to, I'm not saying one way or another trying to sway this conversation, but it was discussed last night at the county commission. I wouldn't characterize it as overwhelmingly accepted, but they requested that it be put on the admin committee agenda, I believe, for January. Ms. Irvin.
Mr. Perryman, if we tore this building down and it was just a vacant lot, would it be a suitable space for us to ever do anything with it in the future? Because my real concern, I mean, 'cause I, was one of the ones who was all for, setting the standard high on what we asked for it, because I think if we're going to sell it, we need to get what we need for it, but I also realize how, irreplaceable land is. So if we tore it down, it would still be an option for us to just keep it. But my question to you is what could we realistically do with that space in the future?
7 acres. I mean, we have plans, the commission and the board work together. I have plans for an elementary school that would fit on the site. It would be small, it would be below the standard that you've set for new schools. However, that demonstrates that the property is large enough to handle a multitude of needs. I mean, and you could look at different options there, on the front side, the back side. It is a property that does have 4 streets. It's sided on 4 sides, so you have lots of access to it, which makes it a more capable property. What we would do in this demolition is they would come in, remove the building, I think the bulk of the parking lot, and then they would seed it down. It would be a grassy grassy lot at that point. If you chose to maintain it, it becomes a lot easier for us to maintain. I mentioned to you the other day, our biggest concern is just keeping people out of it. And we are constantly finding that people are breaking windows and getting in, or pulling doors, to the point that they can get in. So it gives you options. Land, as we talked Saturday, is not easy to come by, and in town specifically not easy to come by. But if you look at 7 acres, the square doesn't take up 7 acres. So you look at what you can probably do, on a site that size.
And another question, I know we had plans at one time, and that did not encompass our new standard of student size, and I don't know a lot about the construction of these, types of buildings. This might be a Hewlett-Spencer question, but I'm just curious, would it even be realistic to even think about going up a level? I know we had talked about that at Spring Hill, doing a 3 level, 3rd level. I mean, would that be possible?
I think our hesitation on that would be 3 floors with high school students versus 3 floors with
elementary
pre-K 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds is a very different obstacle.
I understand.
Can you build it? Absolutely. Would it be feasible in what you guys would want? I would recommend against that.
Okay, thank you very much. One thing we did kind of talk about, and this pretty much echoes what Mr. Irvin was talking about, is our biggest concern all along has been the liability of having an empty building there. With this, that would remove that part of a pretty substantial liability for us. And then we wouldn't be as much of a rush to try to do something. Any further discussion on this? Oh, Mr. Hooper, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So I'm pretty much all in on getting rid or demoing the McDowell property, and I can tell you why. It does obviously give us a lot of freedom, and it removes liability from us, but it also makes that land more valuable and easier to work on in the future at any given time. At this point, we're putting this money up now, and it's basically, we're gonna get it back regardless of what we do with this building, sell it or build on it. This money right now, to me, just seems like a necessary investment into something we own.
Okay, Mr. Lindsay.
I know you ran these numbers through Hewlett Spencer because that was the quickest way for you to get numbers, but do you have a recommendation on, would you wanna hard bid this? Would you, I mean, kinda looking at you guys for guidance on that, so.
We talked about it. I mean, it's gonna delay the process. If we approve this in December relatively quickly, we could do that. If you gave us instruction to bid it, it's gonna be a 30-day process that would be back to you in January. I don't know the cost difference, the significance of it. I do know this, lots of people tear stuff down, but that's a pretty good sized building. So we may, and in fact, I think we got local people that would be interested in tearing it down, but, you know, a track hoe and 2 trucks doesn't really always work out. We do know we could do this. My recommendation would be, and this is from an operationally standpoint, the quicker it's gone, the better it is. I don't know that the savings would be huge to bid it, but I would say to go ahead and move forward with it, but if you wanna bid it, we're more than willing to do that.
I mean, as far as that goes, you could take bids on it and start tomorrow and take bids on them, and until we approve that bid, we're not moving forward with the demo of it anyway, so, I mean, that was just a question for you guys. I mean, I would follow your direction with that, but.
If we were gonna hard bid it, my recommendation would be to combine it with the Spring Hill High School Stadium, and actually that old building at Athendale that we talked about last year, which is not very large, but I would say let's just hard bid and do all of them at one time. However, then that makes us have to decide something on Spring Hill High School Stadium, and I don't know that discussion's really been through that point yet, but, either way is fine with us.
Okay, so do we wanna continue discussing this at the full board meeting, or are we good for consent? Mr. Lindsay, what are your thoughts? Consent? Okay, consent for number 5. Policies.
And Jennifer will handle the others of these. This first one is the facility use policy that we brought to you last month and we had discussion over. I've spoken to several of you over the last month. You asked us to bring this back. A lot of the feedback comes back to the procedures that we had attached more so than the policy. The policy actually is worded pretty well. One of the questions we had were the charges. I know that during that night when we discussed, some of you stated they were too much, some said they were too little. There was a question that I had from a couple of folks over for-profit versus non-profit. The policy actually says that a for-profit can use it if they meet certain standards. One of the questions that I had a discussion with folks about was if we let for-profits use it, do we just charge a higher fee? And what my recommendation would be, and I talked with Jennifer about this today, the last thing out of that was we had it starting in January, and a couple of you said let's just wait and make this start in July at the beginning of the next school year. That makes sense. That gives us time to work on the procedures. We had no negative feedback about the policy, the procedures, and specifically the cost. So my thought was, and you guys can do whatever, but would be maybe to have one or two of you work with us on a just as a board representative on the cost analysis. We come up with something and then bring it back to the board to consider. And if we don't have the policy start until July, then that gives us some time to legitimately get conversation from you guys when we come back. So it's back, and whatever conversation y'all want to have, we're good with.
So just for my clarification, nothing on here is addressing the cost
associated with renting these facilities.
No, and
This is strictly the policy part of it.
the procedures are attached as well, but you can adopt the policy without the procedures if you chose to.
That's what I wanted to clarify, what we
Yeah.
were voting on, or what we would be voting on at the board meeting. I would not feel comfortable voting on any procedures, but I would on the policy part of it.
If I may?
Yes.
Currently our policy, that's where our amounts are housed
Mhm.
in the policy. So the new policy doesn't offer any guidance on pricing structure, that's only in the procedures. So if we pass the policy at the December meeting, then we wouldn't have, unless you all just wanted to keep what we currently have until the July,
Well, the
and
way,
we could put that in the procedures.
the way he described it, we would adopt it, but it would not take effect until July, so we would still be
Okay,
operating under the old, if I
Okay, so
understand
vote on
right.
December, but not effective till July 1.
Yes. Is
Okay.
that the board's wish? And then take the, cost and procedure part of it up at another work session?
Okay, sorry, yep.
Mr. Lindsey?
Mr. Wilbur, as far as the costs go, if it's something that we as a board are voting on, do we need to put that in the does that need to be in the policy, or is?
And I would say the reason we put it in procedures versus policies, we found that most districts were doing that. Just like, say, during the pandemic. If you remember, we changed the cost of getting into our facilities and put some minimum costs on there. What other districts told us was that required a change to board policy. If you put it in procedures and you just re-adopt procedures every year, approve them, with other procedures as they come through, you can change those pretty nimbly. Doesn't really matter, we can do it in policy or in procedure, either one, but it was a little more nimble what they told us that they found, and we just kinda followed suit with what other districts our size were doing.
If it were to go into procedures, would we still have a say-so into it? We would, okay.
That's where I'd like to interject. Should they have in there that the board shall set the price for the procedure, just so they can always have that? Because I'm scared down the road, 10 years from now, superintendent sit here and say, well, I have the procedure, not you.
Yeah.
Should we put that there?
Okay. That would be my desire.
It does address that in the second paragraph.
Okay.
So I think we've covered everything in the policy, it's just a question of the details that were procedural.
Okay. Ms. Irvin?
I'm reviewing this rather, quickly. I had reviewed it earlier, but I still just have a problem with what's becoming like a full-time occupancy for certain establishments. I don't see that that's addressed. I know in line 1 it says that, Murray County Board of Education has control and supervision and grants the temporary use of them to others, but still yet we're approving some things for a whole year at a time. And my problem with that is not that I have a problem with, like for instance, like places of worship doing that, but my concern realistically is what happens when something or an organization that's highly controversial comes in and wants to rent it? And then, what we might potentially have to allow to make sure we're not discriminating against, I don't know, that's my biggest fear with it, honestly. I don't mind here and there, but I hope I'm clearly articulating. I don't feel like I am, but can somebody explain that to me?
There are multiple layers that these requests have to go through. The first request comes in and has to go through the principal. If the principal, approves it and it comes to our office, what we do is a lot of checking to make sure that you have the correct insurances, that you have all of your documentation in line and that everything's okay. There are times that our office has said, no, this is a renter that we've had issues with in other buildings consistently, so we're gonna say no whether you want them there or not. Then everything does come, and I know that sometimes I'm guilty of it, I'm sure some of you are too, that consent on the front end of the board agenda doesn't always get the most scruples paid to it, but everything does come here for approval as well. There is nothing that says we have to let someone in. We always go off of the recommendation of the school, and we do, I mean, right now we're working with a renter in the northern part of the county that we are saying, you just haven't been a very good renter, and regardless of what you say, and promise us you'll do in the future, we're not gonna let you back, so.
That's just my fear, is I wonder if we're potentially, and I know I'm overthinking this, I tend to do that, but I just wonder if we're potentially opening ourselves up to any future liability. 'Cause if something just horrific that come through that we wouldn't allow, I don't know.
I will just say, our biggest issues that we have are just making sure that people are where they're supposed to be at the times that they're supposed to be. When we went to Facilitron, it was kind of this is a great thing, this is gonna help us manage, these folks that are wanting to use our facilities, and what it did was it made our use of facilities go through the roof, because it's very easy to get accessibility to them now. Ms. Gaines, that's in my office, spends an absorbent amount of time on facility rentals or leases. The district gets very little payback for that. She spends a great deal of time dealing with this every week. And so that's our biggest issue. We've been able to manage good renters, bad renters, pretty easily. I understand what you're saying. My concern is not as high on those things. I think we can manage that pretty well.
Okay, any other, Mr. Howell?
So, I mean, I've gotten numerous emails from various organizations. I've gotten numerous emails from one organization that uses our facilities. And I think that what we need to realize is that, you know, we kind of have two different things here. We have, if I want to go to rent a building in Columbia, Tennessee, whether it be one of our facilities or another one, hey, there's plenty of them out there. But if I want to go to Hampshire or Santa Fe or Culleoka or, I mean, Mount Pleasant for that matter, there's not a lot of, you know, places you can meet that would house large organizations or large groups. And just because they're a large, or I say large, I guess that's kind of a matter of opinion what large is. And in my opinion, 30 people is a large group, you know, depending on the situation. But they can't always afford this price. And I see you have like gymnasium price, and then there's the auxiliary price, but only if you rent the gymnasium. Well, that doesn't, at Culleoka, for instance, I have to use this school because this is the school I'm in, day out. I don't necessarily need, like for Cub Scouts, I don't need the main gym. It is completely I have to go through the building. If I'm using the cafeteria, I have to go through all the building to get to that one gym, when I just need the auxiliary gym. So maybe we can take that part out and remove that out to where I can just rent, I'm in the cafeteria and I just want to walk across the hall to the auxiliary gym, because that's what I need. I don't need, so.
Will that come up in procedure or policy?
It can, and what I was gonna say to you is, with that, we can always, the board reserves the right. We can bring something like that to you and just through the consent item, make a note of that in there to you, that the recommendation is there for something to be. One district actually prepared a list in their procedure of groups that they did not charge. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, Parks and Recs, we actually have an agreement, and we found it, that goes back to 1984 on the Riverside Gym. That is an agreement with the Columbia City Parks and Recs that says they get to have youth basketball in our gym. And we found that. That was part of the deal between the city and the school system when the old Riverside was torn down and the new one was built. Groups like that, we can note, and we can make those types of additions
in procedure.
At your will.
Staying then with policy, are we good for policy to go with consent as is? Well, we can just discuss it and vote on it at the board meeting.
But I do have one thing to say.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so the problem that I do have with this is I don't like when we broke down all the fees, 'cause to me, it seems like it's singling out certain renters who use multiple parts of the building who are larger. To me, it doesn't come off right, and I'm trying to avoid like the appearance of impropriety here. It is, I mean, 'cause it is putting a bigger burden on certain groups, and I don't like procedures or policies that do that specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Can
Mr.
we
Lindsey.
just make sure before the board meeting that we add that language Mr. Wilbur talked about?
That the board reserves the right for procedural.
That way.
Thank you. Any other discussion, or, continue on with the policy, please. The next one down.
The next three policies, the next two in particular, 6.306 and 6.4081, are both due to state laws changing January 1. This deals with for our teachers and principals, how to follow disciplining students and the process for removal from a student. The new laws, the Teacher Discipline Act, and so it will impact our policies. The TSBA had sent out model policies, so we have, me and Mr. Ritchie have worked on these to update, as well as, if there were procedures that were needed, those were attached as well. And then 6.409, the child abuse and reporting. Since I've been here, I have discovered that there was an update to the law. This policy needed to be updated, to the most current law as well. And so that's what all these changes are for.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on either of these? Okay, moving on.
Do they go to consent?
Yeah. Did you cover all three or just those first two on that block? Okay, thank you. Instructional low bid purchases over $25,000. Any information that needs to be shared on these? Okay, those all go to consent. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Yes. Ms. Parker.
Sorry, I do have a question on the textbook spending plan. I had asked for just an update from you, Mr. Hickman, as to what classes don't have textbooks, and I just wanted to maybe see something that shows that this plan will actually cover all the classes that currently don't have textbooks right now. I mean, I had a parent that approached me and said they started school and their child was enrolled in an AP class that didn't have a textbook. So, just want to make sure that we're using all our money for this.
Yes, when we did the inventory of all the textbooks at the time we were looking at the ESSER application of where we were deficient, we took the number and they're all in this.
Okay, I'm going to be very honest. For this 7 years that I've been on the board, I have asked for this and I still want it. So, I don't want it to go to consent until I have a chance to see where we stand on every classroom having, I just want to know what we're offering right now. Do they have a textbook? If they don't have a textbook, we're covering it under this plan. How? That's really all I'm asking. I've asked for it for years and specifically for about 2 months now.
Okay, so let me clarify to make sure. What you're wanting is, course offerings, how many courses it is, what textbook go with it, and if it's deficient or not.
Yes.
Okay.
Per
Okay.
school.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. So number 1 and number 3 will go to consent. Number 2 will be left out for discussion. Anything under the operations bids?
Mr. Fulbright, I do need to say, I emailed you guys this afternoon, 4.2.2, we added late, our tractor that maintenance has that we bush hog with is dead. We got an estimate to fix it, and it is twice the value of the tractor. So we went through, all of the vendors here in town, talked to the New Holland, the Kubota, and the John Deere Place. The only one that would issue a bid on a new tractor was John Deere. They gave us Sourcewell pricing on that. I will tell you, I do not have a funding source for that. I can purchase it out of the maintenance money that you gave us if you would allow, but I did not feel comfortable with just making that assumption on myself. If not, then this would be something we would ask for from fund balance. And we just see that, you know, as I mentioned to you the other day, we're running 550 acres right now. We're bush hogging roughly around 75 acres, across our campuses. We tried to find a piece of equipment that would be multifunctional, that we would have a loader on, that we could use in different respects. But that is, just for clarification, we're only bringing that to you because ours is dead.
Mr. Lindsey?
I would just soon take that money out of fund balance. We talked about how healthy that is, and, if we could get that budget amendment by the work session, that's just, the board meeting, that's just my feeling. I don't know what anybody else's is.
Thank you. I would just wanna add that fund balance is set there for unexpected expenses that are not within the budget. I think this qualifies 100% for that, in my opinion.
Then I'll work with Mr. Lukonen to get that budget amendment there for you.
Thank you. Anything you need to add about the buses?
I wanna clarify one thing on the buses. You'll see different prices on two sets of 78 passenger buses. The commission actually upped our original ask when we asked for buses, because at that time we knew buses were up about $4,000. They actually have gone up since they funded this in June. We have a steel shortage, and so the price of the buses has gone up quite a bit. When we bid the buses based off of our standards, and we did a bid, we did a hard bid, only one vendor provided bids. When we added the amenities that we have as far as cameras and radios and things, we were $21,000 over budget. However, we normally budget around $30,000 worth of cameras and radios through our equipment line. So you will see, we took off of 8 buses the radios. We will purchase those through our equipment line. That is not out of our norm as far as buying radios, and that makes this bid come in under what the 189 from the commission allowed us. But you do see 2 different prices on those buses. But we are well stocked on cameras and buses and radios right now, so we would not have spent that money anyway, so this falls right in. I just wanted to clarify why it says the same bus and it has 2 different prices for it. It was just because of how we purchased the amenities that go with them.
Thank you. We good to put this on consent? Okay. All right. Next item, school nutrition staff changes.
And Mr. Parkhurst is here. I'll let him come, speak specifically to this item.
Good evening. Well, it's that time of year, so I'm here with the budget amendment, but also requesting to change 6 part-time positions to full-time to allow for the loss of, or the reduced staff we have throughout this year. It's been a challenge for the people that are in the building. Right now we're been running, I would say, on average 30 people short. So this doesn't do everything we need, but 6 people is better than none. Correct. My 143 will cover the cost. I mean, we are, like I said, 30 people down. The funds alone, just for them not working, for the lack of staff there, is covered by the additional cost. And it's in my budget amendment that you have already.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Sims.
Is 6 all you need, or do you need more?
I need 30 people. The challenge is I need at least the hours. I need the time, and moving these to at least full-time will help alleviate it a little bit. I mean, we're trying to hire. I mean, I've had 3 people interview. Well, I had 3 people apply. 1 person interviewed. I've submitted that. The other person has already found a job in Murray County Schools. Another one decided not to show. So we're looking, but they're not coming, or there's other options out there for them. So it's just there's a lot of options, and we're just not getting the people we need. So, and as we add them in, there's other jobs, and people decide to move on to either in the county or move into other positions outside.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Irvin.
I know we're doing a salary study for our teachers, but is that also going to cover your department? Because that's something I can only imagine needs to be handled sooner than later, so.
It is. It's, we've already talked about it, it's already been discussed, and really where I thought it's probably needs to be, I'm off point to where it really has to go to because of where we're at, so.
Okay, thank you. We good for consent? All right.
I just wanna point out with that item and with the next one as well, during our last budget season, you guys had a lot of a talk about the number of employees that we have, and that if we increase that total number of full-time employees, that was something that needed to come through you guys. So we're trying to be very mindful that if we take someone that works for us and we just make them full-time, I think at times in the past, that would have just been done without any, discussion by you guys. But we're trying to honor that total number of full-time employees so that you know when it comes to budget, we didn't spring 6 people on you, that weren't there last year. So just so you know that.
And we appreciate that. That does, I think, open communication and makes budget season a little more tolerable. All right, temporary transportation position.
So on 4.4,
That was hard to say.
we are, you guys know, we've talked about kind of what we're facing in transportation. We've got two kind of extended circumstances working right now. We have an employee in transportation who has a family issue that's pulling her away right now, and very rightfully so. Sorry. Damn. It gets you sometimes. I'm sorry. It gets you sometimes. But we're dealing with that. The other issue that we have over there is that everyone is driving every day. And we are sometimes having to pull staff from other departments, to come in and actually do our dispatching, answer the phone. I know you've heard no one answers the phone at transportation. If you come, they're on the phone all day. They wear headsets and they're in them all day. We need a temporary person, and we discussed asking for a full-time person. We wanna look during budget season and see if it's really something, if we're fully staffed, that we need. But we have the funds within the transportation budget to cover that throughout the entire year. And we're just asking for you to allow us to hire a temporary full-time person through June to get us through this, hardship. And I apologize for that slip there.
All right, thank you very much. We good to move this consent? Mr. Lindsay?
Well, same question that Mr. Sams asked and Mr. Parker, is it, I mean, being able to fill the positions may be the most difficult part, but is that enough? I mean, right now, what we know that right now this could get us through the year, and what I talked about was with Jennifer, or Miss, we would just rather come back at budget time and ask for formal help that's gonna be full-time, long-term formal help at budget time. We are covering, we've done some things. We've added a dispatch station to my office so that the folks at central office in an emergency can help dispatch, if we run into things. So we're doing those types of things. We just need physical, like another person's body-wise in that office right now. And in talking to them, I think that's enough, because if you've been out there, there are 5 people in a space that is very small, and I don't know that we could add more than 1 right now and physically accommodate where they need to be working during our time.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wanna add, I told Mr. Perriman this the other day, but, ran into a board member in a neighboring county. He used to work in this county, was a teacher of mine actually, and just last week I asked him a question. I said, "What you guys got going on?" And he said, "Bus driver shortage." So it's not something that is specific to us, but it's something that we got a bunch of shortages. I mean, but we got to try to figure a bunch of this out. So
we're 20 short right now, and I will just tell you, based off of conversation, I could see as few as 10 to as many as 20 retiring at the end of the year. And that's with us being 20 short right now. We've talked for years about the aging, population of our drivers, and that's, I will take just a second to say they are running double routes. They are, in some cases, we're paying quite a bit of overtime because we're pulling them sometimes to an hour and a half above their normal time of day. And just to be brutally honest, if you're in your mid to late 70s and you're pulling what essentially becomes a 6.5 to 7 hour day, driving a bus between the morning and the afternoon, it's a heck of a pull. So we're hurting pretty badly out there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howe.
And that's actually what I was about to say, was I know we can get through this year, but at what expense? You know, we're taxing our people now, but tomorrow we may not have anybody. So, you know, is there anything that we can do now to alleviate that? Is there a temporary, I mean...
Get your CDL.
I can't work for the school system.
And I will tell you that we've talked about different types of things. We actually have a teacher at Hampshire that's driving a bus in the morning and the afternoon, and we were able to work that out to where he's not missing any of his duties. We are looking at that across the district if we can make that happen. For the first time this year, we've split bus routes to where there's an AM driver and then there's a PM driver. And the AM driver's the same person every day and the PM's the same person every day, but the kids just know.
Right.
You know, someone drives in the morning and the afternoon. We're looking at staff as far as cafeteria staff. We have 2 drivers that work for our custodial companies, and we've been able to work with our custodial companies to make sure that their hours are there. The problem just truly is having folks that want to do that. The biggest resource, if we could get staff, teaching staff, and we could work it, it's a great incentive to them. It's roughly $16,000 that would go on to their TCRS retirement. We don't pay benefits on that, so it actually comes out cheaper on us in the long run, as far as health insurance and things like that. So we're trying to be progressive in how we think about this, but the problem is there's just, as Mr. Lindsay said, there's a shortage everywhere. No one wants to do it.
Okay, so I guess we're good to put this on consent from the sounds of it. Let's go ahead and do that. And I want to encourage you as we look forward to budgeting and look forward to next year, and I do not want to open this conversation tonight, but just start doing some research on privatized bus services. All right, that is a discussion for another day. It is not tonight. I do want to mention, however, before we wrap up, the County Commission / School Board Christmas Dinner will be December 9th at the Memorial Building, 6 p.m. For some reason it says, 6:30 is dinner, but 6 p.m. is when the event starts. I am not singing, but I am performing. Yes. Chairman Morrow and I are half of a band that will be providing music. More appropriately, entertainment is a better way to describe it. I do need to know if you could let us know by the 1st of December if you and or spouse plan to attend, or significant other, or spouse and significant other. It's whatever you want to do. Mr. Hickman.
Don't forget TSBA conference starts this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I believe. Also, if you're not in on the Murray County Chamber of Commerce, just for those who are interested, they're having the breakfast with the mayors. That will be all 3 of the municipalities. Tickets are $20, and not trying to promote it, but just to let you know, December 1st from 8 to 9.
Okay,
and I'll send out the information Friday.
Thank you very much. Just to, I kind of jokingly lost this in translation. Do let me know by the 1st of December if you'll be there and how many people. Any other comments, discussions? Seeing none?
Do we have a work session in December? And
we do need to decide that. What did we what is on the schedule?
Nothing. The week after the 7th, so it'd be the 14th.
I was just looking at the announcements and communications, and there's nothing on there for a December work session.
Honestly, I was planning on doing
meeting.
it the 21st. I hadn't planned one way or another. I knew that wasn't going to be popular, though. So it will be the 14th. Is that consensus of everybody? So if you have any questions about the schedule, go to Eric's wall. All right, it will be the 14th. Sounds like what we're doing.
Mr. Hickman wanted me to announce to you guys, next Tuesday, we are having to shut down central office because we are actually pulling septic lines out of the ground, and there will be no water or